Hi everyone, it's Jessica and this is VEDA Day 29. Today I'm going to answer 10, I would say random questions, but I don't think they're so random. They are actually questions that my friend came up with for me. I was voxing with him and trying to look up different question tags and find some inspiration for what I wanted to talk about today. I have a lot of thoughts and things swirling around in my head and a lot of different ideas of things that I could talk about, but I kind of am tired of talking about like serious stuff, and I just wanted to do something fun, and I've really been enjoying doing just random silly kind of things, with the what's in my bag and what's on my phone. And so I wanted to kind of keep that going because it just lifts my spirits when I get to do just a fun video, and I would like to keep exploring this sort of other side of my vlogging. So he voxed me 10 questions and I typed them out and I'm going to answer them for all of you. So question number 1 is, if you could only describe yourself in one word, what would it be? I would choose the word growth. The second question is, why did you choose that word and does it have symbolic meaning? Yes, it really, to me, represents that I am constantly learning and growing and developing as a person. I am not the same person today that I was yesterday, and I'm definitely not the same person I was a year ago or 2 years ago. I try really hard to be always reflecting and looking back at the growth that I've made, and making sure that I'm always a learner and that I'm always trying to be the best person who I can be. And I think that I probably will be doing that until the day that I die, and that I'll be looking back at not that I've been different people along the way, but that in a sense, I've constantly been evolving as a person, and that all of that sort of creates the person who I end up being. I just hope that the person I end up being is always a better version, or maybe not better, but at least still good and true to my values. And I think sometimes life can make you jaded, and life can be really hard, and it can sometimes bring out not so great qualities in us. And so for me, I want to make sure that I am always choosing to be a good person and to really just be developing and growing in a positive path, I guess I'll say. So question number 3, if there was one moment as a child that really defined you, what would it have been and why? Oh gosh, it's a good question. I think that, and this maybe isn't a specific moment, I have all of these little moments or memories in my head that, I think back to when I think of my childhood, and that I remember either actually remembering them or through pictures. I've seen photos of certain things and I have heard stories and I piece that together sort of as a memory. But I would say that something that really defined me is just that my family did not have a traditional home, I guess I would say. I grew up in Maine, and pretty rural Maine, and my parents, we lived in trailers, we lived in sort of mobile homes for a while. And when my parents bought the land where they wanted to build their house, they actually had purchased the land, but we hadn't started building yet. And we lived in a tent for a while. And then the first thing that got built was a garage. And the garage did not have any garage doors. It was literally just like 3 walls and a flat top roof. And so there were these big, thick canvas drapes or like tarps that were kind of the doors, and and it was a dirt floor, and we actually lived there for a while they were working on building the house. So one of my birthday parties was actually in the garage. That was our home. We had like a wood stove and, like I said, like dirt floor. And that's where I remember having, a birthday party there. And then once the garage was built, or not the garage, the basement was built of the house, we moved into there. And so the plan was, it was fully enclosed and had a flat top roof again, because the whole idea was that was the basement, and then they would build the 2 floors above that. And, we had blueprints for the house and all of that. And so once the basement was finished, we moved in there. Obviously, because it was a basement, we didn't have any walls or things. And so it was a cement floor, and the bathroom was actually the only internal door that was in the basement, and all the rest of the rooms were sort of sectioned off with cabinets that didn't go all the way up, just tall, like sort of pantry type cabinets. And we lived there, and the idea was that we would live there while the upstairs and the rest of the house was getting finished. And I actually lived in that basement until I was 14. And part of the reason for that is that we just didn't have the money to keep building the rest of the house. I have a lot of memories of like my mom being on the phone with, bill collectors and like actual collections, and memories of our electricity being turned off, and all those kinds of things. My parents also like really invested in me as a kid, and so when I said I want to take flute lessons and learn how to play the flute in 4th grade, they figured out a way to rent a flute for me and pay for me to take private lessons when I was in middle school. And I danced my whole life, and dance was the thing that I did a lot of, and that was really expensive, and they figured out a way to do that and figured out a way to pay for baseball and all of those things that you figure out how to do when you're a parent. And so that also contributed to us living there. And so I would say that the reason that that experience defined me so much is in part because I always felt guilty about that, even to this day. Like, I'm still processing the guilt that I feel around, like, that it's my fault that we always lived in basically that situation. And my parents got divorced when I was 15. And I think that a lot of what, there was so much tension and stress about money and about, living in a basement where you don't have walls. Like, my parents never had a bedroom where they could shut the door and be away from their kid. And I, growing up, never had the opportunity to close a door and just be, like, we were always just in this sort of basically open space together. And it never really occurred to me that that was strange, because that's just what we did. That's how we grew up, and I lived like that from as early as I can remember. But in any event, it was a very formative experience for me because, growing up in poverty, it was a very interesting childhood. I guess I've never really thought about it, but I grew up in poverty and also with so much privilege all at the same time. And so, yeah, that's kind of complex, I suppose, and something that I've only just now kind of realized that maybe that's some of why it was confusing, and is something worth digging into more, I guess, like growing up in poverty and with privilege all at once. So anyway, that's that. The next question was, what song really speaks to your heart and soul? And if others listen to it, they learn something about who you are. You know what? I am obsessed right now with this song called, I think it's called Neverland. And it basically, talks about like being a lost boy is basically what she's singing about, and singing about how, like, Neverland is her home, and she talks about, like, running away and running to Neverland, and how, like, the characters in Neverland sort of become her family, and all of that kind of stuff. And that really speaks to me right now for, I think, a lot of different reasons. But I love Peter Pan. It's one of my very favorite stories, and it has always had really special meaning for me. Peter Pan was actually the movie that I watched every morning. Every single morning I would get up and I would put in the Mary Martin Peter Pan VHS that was recorded off of the TV special when they aired it, and I would watch that, and I knew every single line, I knew every single song. And I actually got the opportunity through my dance experience. I had the opportunity to be in Peter Pan several times. I was a lost boy. I was Tiger Lily at one point. I think I had some other roles in Peter Pan as well. But in any event, it was a really special time for me because I did theater a lot growing up, and obviously dance. And I already knew all the lines. And so, like, the day that someone handed me a script of all of the lines that I had already memorized because I had watched Peter Pan so many times, like, Peter Pan throughout my life has been something that it really speaks to me. And just everything about it, it just, I don't know, it's nostalgia, but it's present and it's fresh. And I love it dearly. And I think that song really speaks to me because right now I'm sort of trying to figure out, like, how do you run away from things but also run towards things that are important, and how do you hold on to the people who've become your family, and then also let them go all at the same time. So yeah, there's just something really special about that song, and the words really really get me. So that's what's been in my head lately, is that song. Next question. If there was a food dish you could have every day of your life, what would it be and why? Oh my goodness. If there was a food dish I could have every day, it would probably be just something to do with either cheese or potatoes. I love cheese. I love potatoes. But I think I love those two foods because they're very versatile and you can eat them in a lot of different ways. So it doesn't exactly answer the question, but definitely I love cheese and I love potatoes. If you think the world could have more of this, what would it be and why? So essentially, like, if the world could have more blank, it would be a better place. I think that if the world could have more compassion, it would be a better place, because I think that we forget to think about other people's situations and to put ourselves in other people's shoes and to really think about what that's like. And I think that having more compassion would really address so many issues of equity and diversity and inclusion and, bigotry. And it would help with politics, and it would help with issues of religion and religious persecution. And I just feel like if the world had more compassion, there would be, it would apply to all of the issues that we have in our world. It would apply to us thinking that we are better than others because we don't understand others. Just, there's so many things. And I think that compassion also really addresses the issue of ignorance, because in order to be compassionate, you really have to understand other people and their situations and their circumstances. And you have to be able to ask them questions and find out what it's like to be them and what it's like to live in their situations and their contexts before you can be compassionate. So that's what I would say, compassion. Looking back at classic movies, what is one you think stood the test of time? So I would say Mary Martin's Peter Pan, but I'm a little biased. I also think, gosh, um, I think that there's a lot of musicals that have stood the test of time. I really love musicals. So things like Grease, I think, stand the test of time. A lot of the Monty Python movies stand the test of time. I think that, a lot of it, like Monty Python is the kind of thing that kids sort of is like a coming of age sort of thing that when they get to be a certain age, like they discover, Monty Python and they get really into all the jokes and it becomes kind of a part of their subculture with their friends. And I've seen that happen with multiple generations with those movies. So I think those kinds of things, but definitely musicals. My Fair Lady and things like Showboat and Oklahoma, like all those things I think stand the test of time because they were created in a certain time period, but they're also set in a certain time period, and they kind of address both of those things, and they're classic and they're great. And the music too, maybe that's what it is too, is that the music, the soundtracks are just so strong that they're able to stand the test of time because those songs really resonate and they're just awesome no matter when you listen to them. What is your favorite hashtag or one you would want to create, and what do you want to see become of that hashtag? Oh man, that's a good one. I'm gonna go with the obvious choice here because again I'm a little bit biased, and I'm gonna talk about BFC 530. And no, normally I would try to not talk about BFC 530, which is the Breakfast Club 530 for 5:30 a.m. And it's Monday through Friday at 4 time zones at 5:30 in the morning. Educators get together and they talk about one question that's submitted from the community, and they just have 15 minutes to talk about that one question. And I organize that chat, and the reason that I would kind of want to, I guess, say that that one is my favorite is because it's been so formative for me, and it really has changed my life, and it's changed my life in all positive ways, but not just ways that have in the moment been positive, if that makes sense. So by being part of BFC 530, I've had some really high highs and some really low lows, which have then been positive moments because I've learned a lot from those lows and from those challenges and those struggles. And I think having to face those things has also meant facing my fears and being vulnerable sometimes and learning a lot about myself and learning a lot about education and just there's so many things that I've learned because of BFC 530. What I would like to see become of that hashtag is that it stands the test of time. I would love to see BFC continue to just be vibrant and a really strong community of educators who continue to support each other, who continue to be there for one another, and who continue to welcome others without question. That when someone comes into the community, that they welcome them with open arms, and they whether they've been there for a month or a year or hopefully 5 years as a community member of BFC 530, that when someone new comes in, they say, hey, welcome, we're so glad to see you, and we're so excited that you are here. And that's what I want that community to continue to be. I would also like it to while I want it to sustain certain values, I would love to see it sort of continue to reinvent itself throughout the years and morph into whatever it needs to be based on what the community needs are. And so I'm just excited to see where that goes and what happens with it, because I think that could be, I just think that could be a really neat thing to see, both continuation of values of that chat as well as a renewal of that community over the course of time based on what's going on with the people who are there and what's going on with just education in general. So that's what I would say for that. When you hear the word legacy, what do you believe that means and why? For me, a legacy is something that when you take yourself out of the equation, it's lasting and it's still there and it still has a positive impact on others. And it's, it's something that really it matters, and it has a lot to do with change. It's changed the course of something, whether that's a child's life or a teacher's life or a school community or education in general. Like I think that for me, that's what it means to leave a legacy. Is that it goes beyond just a project or a strategy or a particular idea that you've had and that you've done something with. That when you take yourself out of the equation, it's a continuation of almost like a new mindset or a different way of doing things because you had that impact. So that's what I think about with legacy. And then the last question is, using the way you define legacy, what would you want people to see as your legacy? This is a hard question, and I actually got asked this question a couple of weeks ago, and it was a big struggle for me because I'm trying to do a lot of soul searching and figure out what do I want my legacy to be, but what is sort of my dream. And the thing that I keep coming back to, I actually talked about in a different VEDA video last week or last weekend, is that if there's one thing that I could sort of solve for by the time I die, it would be sustainable teaching. It would be educators being able to be professionals who are paid what they deserve, who have reasonable hours, who are not overworked, who aren't overburdened with extraneous things that don't really impact kids and don't really have a strong effect on the act of teaching and supporting kids. And it would be the ability for them to, have really well-rounded lives in the same way that, I see my husband enjoy his work at times and get excited about some of the things he's doing, and he's compensated well for what he does, and he has growth opportunities, and he has a team, but he also gets to work by himself. Like, he has that in his career, but he also gets to go to work during the hours of work and then come home and not worry about work. And there's the occasional deadline or project that requires, a little bit of extra work, but he's not working and thinking about work every night and every weekend, and it's not that constant thing. And that's the kind of thing that I wish for education. I wish that being a teacher and being a principal and, being someone who is working in a school could also be equivalent to that kind of profession where you feel respected and valued and compensated well, but you don't have to kill yourself for the job. And that, yeah, I get it. We're in the business of kids and people. And sometimes that means you're going to go home carrying the burden of what's going on in those kids' lives. But I wish that there were enough services and resources and supports for those kiddos, that all of that didn't rest with the teacher or the principal, that there was just a more well-rounded, holistic approach to education for everybody who's part of that system, whether it's the student, the family, the school counselor, the nurse, the principal, the teacher. Like, I wish that for everybody. So anyway, there are my 10 questions. Hopefully that was enlightening. Thank you so much for taking the time to give me these questions, my wonderful dear friend. I really, really appreciate it, because otherwise I didn't know what to talk about today. So there is VEDA 29. I hope everybody had a great day, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.